Hi, boys and girls. Hi. Hi, I'm Acadiana's mother, Goose, and I'm here today to read some stories for you here in Lafayette, Louisiana. And I want to welcome you all today, and I hope that you enjoy these stories. Both of these books are about adoption, about pet adoption, and that's so important. We should always adopt, not shop, when looking for a pet, okay? How about let's get started? This one is A Home for Sally. This is a good story. Sally has a longing to be adopted that began when she was placed in a kennel permanently. A Home for Sally shares the story of a young poodle who considers she is unlovable and unadoptable because of her disability. Sally believed that her dream of once again having a family may never come true. And this was written by a very nice lady, Stanetta Anthony, and looking forward to reading this book to you. I enjoyed it when I read it. A Home for Sally is dedicated to every dog who is anxiously awaiting adoption. Mrs. Brooks had tried to get people who were visiting her home to take one or more of her puppies without success. After some time, and with a sorrowful heart, she decided to take her puppies to the Love and Care Kennel. Mrs. Brooks heard this canine housing facility had a good adoption program and that her puppies would soon be placed with a loving family. As Mrs. Brooks entered the kennel with her puppies, they all walked in without difficulty, except one, Sally, who was limping. Sally was born with a physical handicap. She did not have a front left paw. Time at the kennel went by fast for Sally's siblings. Each of them was adopted within 1 month of being at the kennel. However, Sally's time at the kennel went by much slower. It had been 9 months and Sally still had not been adopted. Waiting to be adopted was miserable for this puppy. With tears rolling down her fur, Sally would often think, "When is it my turn? When is someone going to adopt me? I have no brothers and sisters to play with. Most of my doggy friends are gone. I'm the last one left. By the time someone adopts me, I will no longer be a cute little puppy, but a full-grown dog with a big deformity." National Pet Adoption Month was soon approaching. It was the special time of the year when many people would visit the kennel looking to adopt a canine. To prepare for this special month, all the dogs in the kennel were groomed. Their nails were clipped, polished, and their doggy fur brushed to a shiny coat. All the dogs enjoyed this special treatment, everyone except Sally. She wouldn't let the groomers put polish on any of her nails. She felt it was too embarrassing to have only 3 of her nails polished. After each dog was groomed, they were confident they would be adopted, including Sally. Monday morning came, and Chris, the owner of Love and Care, said to all the dogs, "Okay, everyone be on your best behavior. I want each of you to be adopted and have a new home." As the doors opened, people began to come in. The kennel was super busy from the time they opened until the time they closed. Excitement was in the air. Children were running and playing with all the different dogs. As the children played, some of them would point to Sally, saying, "Look at that funny-looking dog. She can't even run." This was frustrating for Sally because she couldn't run but could only limp behind the children. National Pet Adoption Month was almost over, and Sally still hadn't been adopted. She was feeling sadder and sadder by the day. Watching as her friends were being adopted, Sally would walk to the mirror looking at herself. She thought about what her doggy friends Bobo and Zumi said to her, repeating it over in her mind. "You're not worth adopting. Who wants to adopt a deformed puppy?" She walked away from the mirror with her head hanging down, holding back her tears. Later that evening, when Chris was at Bobo, Zumi, and Sally's cages, she patted each of them on the head. "Don't be sad, guys. You'll have a home soon." Sally barked at her two friends and said, "Soon? What is soon? I can't go through this rejection much longer. If I'm not adopted, I don't know what I will do," crying softly as she walked to the back of her cage. It was the last day of National Adoption Month, and Sally was still waiting to be adopted. Only 2 customers had come into the kennel that day, and they were only purchasing toys for their new pets. No one was looking to adopt. "Well," said Chris, "I think I'm going to close a little early today. We haven't had any customers for hours." But before she could finish her sentence, the doors opened. In walked a couple with their child. They walked to the counter and began asking questions about the adoption process. While Chris was answering the couple's questions, their child walked around the store. He went from one end of the store to the other, never seeing Sally. Going back to his mom, he asked, "Where are all the dogs? I thought we were coming to get me a new puppy." Looking at her child, the mother replied, "Son, be patient. This is a big decision. I'm sure they have some dogs somewhere in the store." "Okay, Mom," replied the boy as he walked toward the back of the kennel. He opened the door, and there was Sally standing by her cage. For a moment she looked up with excitement, but then turned her head. Putting his hand out, the little boy said, "Come here, doggy." Sally didn't move. Again the boy said, "Come here, doggy." Slowly Sally limped to the boy. As he looked into Sally's eyes, he said, "I think I've found my new puppy. This is the one." Jumping up and down with excitement, the boy ran back to the front of the store. He said, "I found our puppy. Come look and see. This is the one I want." Hearing this, Sally's ears perked up. "Maybe this is the day," she said. Walking over to the cage, the parents looked at Sally and whispered to Chris, "Where's the dog's paw?" Chris began to explain that Sally was born without one of her paws, but other than that, she was a normal dog, and she was the last of her litter to be adopted. She is 9 months old and was a star student in her obedience class. Sally is great with children and has had all her vaccinations. As the couple talked, Sally waited, limping back and forth in her cage. It seemed to take forever. Sally wondered, what is the couple going to do? Calling to Chris, the couple said, "We've made our decision. We are going to adopt Sally." Hearing the news from her cage, Sally began to limp around excitedly. She was finally going to be adopted. Sally couldn't wait to have her adoption papers signed and go to her new home. As the papers were signed, Sally proudly looked at her new family with a small tear rolling down her fur, thinking, "Someone finally wanted me, deformity and all." As the boy carried Sally out of Love and Care Kennel, she became a little sad looking back at her friends Bobo and Zumi sleeping in their cages, wondering if they would ever be adopted. Oh, this is such a good story. Did you enjoy it as much as I did? I love this story. And poor little Sally finally got a family. How exciting. I want to thank Miss Zanetta Anthony again for this wonderful book, A Home for Sally. Thank you again. I really appreciate it. Stonetta Anthony was born and raised in the Midwest. She was a preschool educator before becoming an author. Her creative talent was enhanced and developed while educating young minds. Being in a classroom atmosphere produced her ability to write books that are educational, insightful, and thought-provoking. She resides in Illinois with her husband, children, and grandchildren, where loving life to the fullest is her and her family's primary goal. Thank you again, Miss Anthony. Now another good book is Run, Roo, Run, a story of the thin pink-chested dog, written by Lisa Haydell, Vicky Domina. That's a very difficult name to say. Let's see about this story. It was a cool fall day. The green leaves were changing to red and yellow. Many of the leaves were on the ground. Young Emily was walking to school with her pink backpack hanging off one shoulder. She saw the leaves and decided to start kicking the leaves like a soccer player kicks the ball. Emily laughed when the leaves would fly up in the air. Emily walked past a clothing store, a post office, and several other businesses. She thought she heard a dog barking, but when she looked, she didn't see anything. After school, Emily took the same path back home. She remembered what happened in the morning and started to look for the dog. Here, doggy, she called. No answer. Emily thought, oh well, I must have just imagined I heard that dog. When she arrived home, she told her mom what had happened at school and about the dog. The next day, Emily walked to school with her pink backpack and brown bag lunch. Kicking the leaves into the air, she was singing, here, doggy. Then she heard the bark. Emily stopped and looked around. Out from under one of the buildings was a brown and white face with a black nose. Emily called, here, doggy. The dog slowly crept out from under the tan building. He barked. Emily looked at the dog. He was a beagle. Neither of them moved. She thought he looked very thin. His chest was pink because there was no hair. Are you hungry, boy? Emily opened up her brown bag and broke off part of her turkey and cheese sandwich. She threw it to the thin beagle. As he took a few steps toward her, she noticed he limped. Poor doggy, she thought. She threw a portion of the sandwich towards him, but he didn't move. Emily realized she would be late for school, so she started to run. As she was running, the leaves only flew slightly high in the air because she wasn't playing her soccer game. She turned and saw that the thin beagle with the pink chest had limped toward the food, grabbed it, and hobbled back under the building. While at lunch that day, Emily decided to save another piece of her sandwich so she could feed the dog on the way home from school. This time, instead of lazily walking home in the cool air, she decided to run home. She stopped in front of the tan building and called, here, doggy. The thin, pink-chested dog poked his brown and white face out from under the building. She called him again, and he inched his way out, but stopped when his front legs poked out onto the grass. She opened her pink backpack, took out the brown bag lunch, and opened the crumpled up bag. Inside was 1/3 of her lunch, the turkey and cheese sandwich. She broke it into 3 pieces and threw one piece toward the thin, pink-chested beagle. He didn't move. She threw the second piece. He inched his way out a little more. Emily started to move towards him, and he backed his way under the building. Here, doggy, Emily called. Poor thing, she thought. He must be scared. She threw the last piece of sandwich and started to walk past the building. Arf, arf. Emily stopped, turned around, and watched as the thin-chested beagle limped toward the food. He gobbled it up and limped back under the building. Emily ran home to tell her mother. That evening, after supper, Emily asked her mom if they could bring some dinner to the thin, pink-chested beagle under the tan building. Her mother told her they would drive to the building with some of the fried chicken they'd eaten for dinner. As her mom drove their large white car towards the building, Emily sat in the back, holding the aluminum foil-wrapped paper plate of broken up fried chicken pieces. Emily told her mom where to stop. As her mom parked the car, the headlights of the car shone under the building. Emily and her mom got out, and Emily called, "Here, doggy, here, doggy." Nothing. "Here, doggy, here, doggy." Then from under a building, Emily and her mom could see two glassy brown eyes. The headlights of the car were shining towards the tan building. Here, doggy, we brought you some dinner," Emily said. Her mom told her to be careful because the dog was probably afraid. "It's okay, Mom, he likes me." Emily showed the thin pink-chested beagle the aluminum foil wrapped paper plate. "Arf, woof, arf, woof," he barked and howled. Emily took off the aluminum foil and walked closer towards the building. They placed the paper plate of broken up fried chicken near the building and walked back towards their car. Emily and her mom climbed into their car and watched as the dog inched his way from under the building. He limped towards the paper plate of fried chicken pieces and gobbled them up. He then raised his head, looked at them with his large, sad brown eyes, and limped back to crawl under the building. "See, Mom, he just thanked us for the food." "I believe you are right, Emily." Emily's mom felt sad for the dog. He was an older dog. His chest was pink because he had no hair. The hair on his broad chest was gone. Very thin, she thought. Poor thing, he must have been abandoned and is now living under the building, waiting for food scraps. She thought to herself, "I have to do something to help him." In the morning, Emily's mom made 2 turkey and cheese sandwiches. She cut one of them into small pieces and placed it in a bag. The mom told Emily that the cut-up sandwich was for the thin, pink-chested beagle. She explained that Emily was to only feed him half in the morning and the other half on the way home. Emily asked her mom if that night after supper if they could drive over to the tan building to feed him again. Her mom told her they would do that after all of Emily's homework had been finished. Emily kissed her mom and started walking towards school. She was so excited and couldn't wait to see the beagle again. Emily did as her mom asked. She stopped in front of the tan building and called, "Here, doggy, here, doggy." Now the thin pink-chested beagle inched his way out from under the building and stood looking at Emily. She opened her brown bag and took out one half of the cut-up sandwich. She threw it towards the dog. He limped towards the food, gobbled it up, and limped back towards the building. "Bye, doggy. See you this afternoon." Emily yelled as she ran towards school, kicking the leaves in the air. This time the red and yellow leaves flew higher in the air just like a soccer ball. Emily was so happy. She knew the thin, pink-chested beagle would be waiting for her after school. Emily couldn't wait for school to end. She ran all the way to the tan building. Here, doggy, she called. Out came the thin, pink-chested beagle. She put down her pink backpack, opened it up to remove the crumpled-up brown bag. She took out the other piece of the cut-up turkey and cheese sandwich and threw it toward the dog. He took a few steps, stopped, and ran back to the building. Emily noticed he did not run on the building this time. He just stood there. As Emily started slowly to walk, she looked back and saw that he limped towards the food, gobbled it up, and stood there. Emily ran home. That night, after Emily had finished her homework, she and her mom piled into their white car, drove to the tan building, and parked. The headlights shining under the building. They both called, "Here, doggy, here, doggy." The aluminum foil-wrapped paper plate of leftover fried chicken pieces was in Emily's hands. She heard, "Arf, woof, arf, woof." Emily took off the aluminum foil and walked towards the building. She put the plate on the ground. Emily and her mom climbed back into their car and watched as a thin, pink-chested beagle inched his way out from under the building, limped towards the food, and gobbled it up. He stood there. Emily's mom looked into his large, cheerless brown eyes. Her heart felt sad for him. She knew she had to do something to help him. Every day for 28 more days, Emily would stop on her way to and from school and feed the thin, pink-chested beagle a sandwich. She did the same things on the weekend, and every night for 28 nights, Emily and her mom would bring an aluminum foil paper plate of leftovers from that night's dinner. They noticed that after a few nights, the thin, pink-chested beagle would be sitting outside the tan building waiting for them. His tail would wag as they drove up. Every morning and afternoon, he waited for Emily to arrive with his sandwich. Emily and her mom both realized that they needed to get help from the thin, pink-chested beagle. The weather was getting colder, and they knew he couldn't continue to live under the building. He needed to live in a warm home with loving people. Emily and her mom couldn't keep him because they already had 2 cats and a dog. One day they were able to walk up to the thin pink-chested beagle and pet him. They realized how he trusted them. Emily and her mom gingerly picked him up and placed him inside their white car. The mom drove towards the local animal shelter. Emily carried him inside, and her mom explained what had been going on for the last 30 days. After signing some papers, they left him there. Emily cried on the way home, knowing she would never get to see him again. The mom, too, had tears in her eyes. They had both become very attached to the thin pink-chested beagle. Her mom explained that they had done a very nice thing to help him. That night, still crying, while her mom kissed her and tucked her in bed, Emily prayed for the thin pink-chested beagle. She prayed that he would be okay and find a loving forever home. At the same time, there was a little girl named Victoria. She lived with her mom and dad along with their 6 cats and fish. Victoria loved animals so much she had been asking her parents for a dog, but they felt that she had already too many animals to care for. Every morning before school, she would wake early to feed all of them. Victoria had a black and white tuxedo cat named Christmas Bell, a tabby named Snowbell, another long-haired tuxedo named Fur-Y Cat, a short-haired tuxedo named Jack, a black cat with a large head named Miles, a half-Siamese cat named Spencer, and a betta fish named Rainbow. After school and on weekends, she volunteered time at the local animal shelter. Every weekend, Victoria would either be at the shelter or another location promoting animal adoptions. Oh, I'm going to be running out of time. I'm not going to have a chance to finish the book for you today. I'm going to just read as much as I can, and then I'll read the rest of it another time, okay? On one of the weekends, Victoria was working for an animal shelter at a garden store and was assigned a thin, pink-chested beagle named Rufus to take care of during the day. Her job was to walk him and hold him for people who might be interested in adopting him. At the end of the day, Victoria's mom drove to the garden store to pick her up. Victoria was talking with a man and lady about Rufus. Her mom did not want to interrupt, so she sat down to wait for her to finish her job. While Victoria was holding Rufus, she noticed her mom and pointed to him. Victoria's mom and Rufus looked at each other, and it was love at first sight. When Victoria and her mom were driving home, the mom asked questions about Rufus. This is going to be a wonderful story. Oh my goodness. After Victoria left to go out and play, her mom told Victoria's dad that she had found the perfect dog for the family. She explained that Rufus was an older dog and he was not in very good health. The parents decided to adopt Rufus and surprise Victoria. When she came home from school, Victoria was so excited because she now had a dog. The family took Rufus to their local veterinarian to have him examined. The vet said the underweight dog was about 7 years old. He had a skin disease called eczema, and his hip was injured. The vet also said it looked like he had been abused because he was very scared and timid. The family left the vet's office with medicine for his skin as well as a special medicated shampoo. Rufus adjusted well to his new life. He lived in a warm home. He was fed every day. His new forever family played with him. He went for car rides and walks in the park, but most of all, he was loved. Rufus was still scared of loud noises, aluminum foil, and doorbells. Over the 2 years he had lived with Victoria and her family, his fears have improved. He has doubled his size and weight. His hair grew back and now covers his pink chest. He is no longer afraid of doorbells. When someone rings the doorbell, he now runs the dog, wagging his tail. He loves riding in the car and bringing Victoria to school. Once a week, he rides in the car to get his weekly spa treatment of a bath and have his nails cut. He still loves his walks in the park. When Victoria or her parents open the door, they will say, "Run, Roo, run!" He runs toward the car door, waiting for him to open it so he can jump in. One day, Victoria's mom said she was going to hire a new lady named Louise to clean her house. Louise asked if she could bring her daughter Emily to help her. Victoria's mom said that would be fine because her daughter Victoria would also be at home. When the doorbell rang that day, Louise and Emily showed up to clean up Victoria's house. Rufus ran to the door and they walked in. Rufus ran back and forth and jumped on the sofa, then to the floor and back on the sofas. He cried with delight, and it puzzled Victoria and her mom. They couldn't understand why Rufus was acting the way he did. It appears that this is such a good story, and I have to end it right now. I'm so sorry. Well, thank you again for letting me read Run, Roo, Run. Thank you so much, and hope you have a good day. Bye from Acadiana's Mother Goose. Bye.